This video is intended for audiences over the age of 13. If you are not 13 years or older, please click away from this video now. You have been warned. What's going on, you guys? It's your man James, aka JP, back again with the toy room and a little bit of a different video today. I wanted to tell a story. I feel like everybody who's into collecting whatever it is, whether it's toys, video games, music, clothes, whatever, everybody has a story, and I wanted to tell my story on how I got started collecting toys and then also transitioning over to video games. I started off with toys, then moved into video games, and now I do a bit of both. So pretty much the seeds were already planted for me to really get into this. We moved here, my family moved here from New York to Florida, to South Florida where I'm located now, in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001. And when we moved here, my dad turned our garage into his own man cave where he collected Star Wars and NASCAR figures. And I think I have some pictures. If I do, I'll put them up on the screen. But I mean, that place was just absolutely incredible. It's a shame that he did that at a time when YouTube really wasn't a thing, because I would have loved to shown that whole garage off. Now the garage is actually turned into a regular garage and all his collection is either sold or in boxes. But I mean, it was just crazy the way he redid the garage. He had actual shelving from Toys R Us, because he used to work at Toys R Us at the time. He had shelving from Toys R Us, so he had all his NASCAR stuff on pegs, and he had just the Star Wars figures all over the shelf. It was really like a miniature Toys R Us, and I always thought that was like the coolest thing ever. But that never really got me into toy collecting or anything like that. You know, I still went about my regular life, but I always thought it was really cool that he had that set up. Now fast forward a bunch of years, and now we are in 2011, and I just graduated high school, and it's time to look for a job. And I was just applying at random places, and the first place to actually give me an interview was Kmart. And at the same time, since my dad used to work at Toys R Us, because he worked at Toys R Us through the early 2000s, but by 2011 he was already working elsewhere, but he still knew some of the people over at the Toys R Us that was near us. So he actually got me set up for an interview there as well. And I ultimately ended up taking the Toys R Us job over the Kmart job, which was probably the smarter move, because Kmart went out of business way before Toys R Us ever did. And I had already left Toys R Us probably like 4 years prior to them even going out of business, so that never really affected me. However, I only chose the Toys R Us job because it was closer to home. It was pretty much a guaranteed job because my dad knew the people there. I had nothing to do with toys at all. I did not want to work there any other reason than just needing to make money, being fresh out of high school and wanting to make money on my own for the first time in my life. So I started working at Toys R Us. I just think of it as a normal job. I'm not even interested in the toys on the shelves whatsoever. They don't mean anything to me. They don't hold any interest to me, anything like that. And I'd say I probably worked there, I don't know, maybe about a year or so before I even really started getting into the toy collecting. And what got me into toy collecting was I was just stocking the shelves like I normally do, and one day I pulled a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Legacy Power Morpher out of the box, put it on the shelf, and I took a look at it and I was like, hold on, this is a Mighty Morphin toy in the year this is probably 2012 at this point. 2012, we have a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers toy, and this is like a replica of what came out in the 90s. I was like, yo, this is actually really cool. So I look at the price, it's $60. I'm like, this is cool, but I'm not gonna spend $60 on a Power Ranger morpher that I'm never gonna do anything with, other than, you know, there's nothing I can do with it other than play with it, and I'm not gonna play with toys. You know, I'm like, at this point, maybe 21 years old or something like that. I'm like, I'm not playing with this. So I put it back on the shelf, don't think anything of it. And probably a couple days later, I'm stocking that aisle again, and I pull out the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Legacy Megazord, and I'm like, wow, now this is crazy. I had this exact Megazord growing up, and I checked the price on that. That was $60 as well, and I was like, well, this is cool because I still get to build it. It's something I actually had growing up. I never had the Morpher growing up, and you know, it was just so cool. So what did I do? Naturally, I bought the Megazord and ended up buying the Morpher. So instead of spending the $60, I ended up spending $120. And from that moment on, I never looked back. And I just started getting into the collecting. And it all started with originally seeing that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Legacy Power Morpher, and then ultimately the Legacy Megazord, and ended up getting both. And then it kind of spiraled into what it is today. So from those, I kind of just started finding nostalgic things at Toys R Us that I either had growing up or they were based on something I had growing up. So retro style figures, you know, Star Wars, Pokemon, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, stuff like that I would see, and I would just like be like, oh, this is cool, let me buy it. And then I really never stopped buying it. But I didn't immediately transition into toys. I actually had a phase where I was all about Legos, which was shortly after I bought the Legacy Megazord and whatnot. I went on to Legos just because if any of the sets got damaged in shipping, you know, when they get off the truck or whatever, and let's say the box is smashed up or something like that, my manager would actually mark it down like 80% off. So the Lego sets I would actually get really cheap. If they were damaged or maybe returned or something like that, I would get them for extremely cheap. I'm talking like $20 for like an $80 set or something like that. So I would always do that, and I would really enjoy building the Legos. So I had a whole Lego collection. Again, I think I have some pictures. If I do, I'll put them on the screen. I don't even know where those Legos are, if I even have them anymore. I'd have to check. If I do, they're in boxes somewhere. But so I went through a Lego phase, but then I started getting back into the toy collecting, from Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles. I went through a Predator phase at one time, and I'm not even a huge Predator fan, but it got to the point of collecting where I went from getting stuff just because they were nostalgic or anything like that to really appreciating the artwork that went into the creation of the toys, from the sculpt and the articulation and the details. And when I saw those Predator figures by NECA, I was blown away with the amount of detail that they would put in them. And just because of that, not even because I was a Predator fan, just because I really loved the designs and, again, all the details that they put into it, I went into a Predator collecting phase at one point, and I have probably like 30 or 40 Predators in my collection, which are all in boxes right now. They're not on display here in this setup. But yeah, I went through a whole Predator collecting phase, and that's pretty much it. It spiraled out of control from there. Now, how I got into the video game collecting, I feel like I've actually been into that my whole life, because I've always had at my house, and I know I have a picture of this and I'll throw that up on the screen. I had an old drawer. I had a drawer full of old video games that I had from my childhood, from Nintendo 64 stuff, some NES, and some Game Boy stuff, I believe, and maybe a couple Sega Genesis things. And, you know, I've always had that in growing up. I never got rid of those things for whatever reason. Like, some stuff I did get rid of. We had a Dreamcast we got rid of. Super Nintendo we ended up getting rid of. But for some reason, some of those stuff just stuck around and never left my possession. And every now and then I would, whenever I had friends over or anything like that, we'd dust it off. We'd throw in like NFL Blitz on the 64, even Wayne Gretzky's hockey, or some of the old THQ wrestling games, and we would actually we would play them and have a good time. And every now and then I would always love going back to playing those old retro games. And I can't really pinpoint the exact point where I actually started collecting the retro stuff. I just feel like as the toy collection grew and as the room grew, I just started, actually, you know what, I can pinpoint. When I moved out, when I had Toy Room 1.0 in my old apartment, if you guys have been around for a while, you know, you remember that phase. Once I moved out and got my own place and started setting everything up into essentially what was my first official toy room. When I was back at my parents' house, I had like a mini version, and then it evolved into the Toy Room 1.0, and this is 2.0 right here. But when I set everything up, I took some of those old games that I had in the drawers and I actually just set them up on display. And then I would go to thrift stores and find random video games from my childhood or stuff that looked cool and old systems, and I would just buy them at the thrift stores. Like I mentioned before, not the stuff behind me, but my video game shelf that's to my right, your left, this way. Probably like 80% of my collection has been thrifted as far as video games go, which is really cool. So that's actually when I did start getting into the collecting. But I feel like my whole life I kind of been into that, because I would always think of a game from the past and go on eBay, search it up, buy it. So I guess they kind of go hand in hand together. And that is pretty much how I got started into the collecting thing. You know, it started really early with my dad and his collection, and that kind of, you know, always sparked my interest. And then working at Toys R Us and not really being interested or working at Toys R Us for the toys just to make money, but then I got into the toys and, you know, that benefited me as well. And then gradually moving on to the video game collecting, and now the arcade collecting. Well, I guess Arcade 1UP, not legit arcades, but I really got into the arcade scene because of Arcade 1UP. Now, I'm a 90s kid. I really didn't grow up with arcades, but because of Arcade 1UP, I'm kind of dabbling into that scene a little more. I really am not the best person to speak on arcades because I'm not that well versed in it, but toys and retro video games I can talk about for days. But I love what Arcade 1UP has done in getting me into retro arcade gaming. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, I feel like everybody has a story, and I definitely am interested in hearing your guys' stories. So let me know down in the comments below your story on how you got started collecting whatever it is you collect, from toys to postage stamps, whatever it is. I would love to hear your story down below. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit of a different video, but if you did enjoy it, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends, and also be sure to follow me on Instagram. That link is in the description down below, and you can check out all of my older pictures. I actually have a memories thing set up on my Instagram. You can see how my collection has grown, where it started to where it is now. All the pictures through the years. I definitely went through that the other day and just had a nostalgia trip, so that was really, really cool. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here. So as always, guys, stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys next time.